I'm Mina Malik Hussain, and you're watching The Coffee Table. And today we have one of those surprisingly interesting shows where when I tell you what it's about, you might be like, what? But it's actually a sort of springboard into talking about a lot of kind of philosophical and legal ideas and you know, sort of how we live in the world and how capitalism needs to be controlled. I have a lawyer on set who's giving me the look. It's like, this doesn't sound like the show I signed up for.
Capitalism.
Suck it to the man. Okay, I digress. Today we're going to be talking about consumer rights internationally and in Pakistan. We're going to be talking about what consumer rights means, what does it mean to be a consumer, and then sort of, you know, things like efficient business practices and how consumer rights change with time and how we're sort of moving into this different world. And I don't want to give it all away. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Fahad Malik to set. He is the founding member at Praxis Legal. He teaches civil procedure at the Lahore University of Management Science, and he specializes in litigation before the High Court and regulatory authorities. And joining me from Islamabad over the internet is Mr. Nadeem Iqbal. He is the CEO of the Network for Consumer Protection in Pakistan, which is a policy advocacy organization that's been working for consumer rights since 1992. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's nice to always have a physical person here.
In COVID times, that's getting quite difficult. But
yeah, no, it's true. So I want to sort of, as I like to say, begin at the beginning. So when we talk about consumer rights, we obviously have to talk about what a consumer is.
Yeah.
So what is a consumer?
So there are two ways that a consumer can be defined. One is a general definition where consumer is any person who consumes any sort of product or service. I mean, anyone using Facebook, for example, is a user. Anyone using a mobile phone is a consumer. Anyone who purchases any good is a consumer. But the law slightly waters down the definition of what exactly a consumer is.
Okay.
So a consumer would be anyone who is using that good for themselves. Now, before we get into, you know, the nitty-gritties of what the law is, what particular consumer laws are in Pakistan, a general comment that I'd like to make is we need to understand consumerism as a broad subject.
Yes.
So on one end, you have a person who, on the one hand, you have something very obvious that I go out and I purchase, for example, a microwave.
Yes.
Now, that microwave is a manufactured good that I'm purchasing from a particular entity that has manufactured it. On the other hand, we are also using, for example, natural gas in our houses through the pipe network of SNGPL or SSGC, or we're buying LPG, or we're using cellular technology. Now, all of that also comes under consumerism. So when we talk about consumer rights, we're not just talking about a particular law which says that a good or service that has been provided to you, how to ensure that it's done in the best possible manner. It's also all of these other things that we engage with on a regular basis. So, for example, you have specialized authorities like NEPRA, which deals with electricity-related issues. So, as an electricity consumer, if you have an issue against a particular DISCO, the distribution services.
You know, it's so misleading. You know, when you see DISCO, you're like, yeah, and then it's like, no, actually, it's just the people.
Yeah, it's just LESCO, FESCO, IESCO, so it's not really anything fancy.
I know, sadly.
Sadly. So, for example, for you are a consumer of a distribution company, and then if you have a complaint against them, you go to the go to NEPRA, which is the National Electric Power Regulatory Authority.
And it's a pretty vast kind of pool as well, because like you said, when we talk about consumption, there's so many different aspects of our consumption. It's not just going to the shops and buying something.
Exactly.
It's goods and services, and there's so many kinds of different goods and services that are out there. And I think that this is where, Nadeem, you come in, is that tell me a little bit about the work that the Network for Consumer Protection does. But first, we're talking about different kinds of consumption. And I know that the network also kind of looks at different aspects of that. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, as you know, the network was created in 1992, and it was basically done by a group of doctors. And gradually, you know, initially its name was the Rational Use of Medicines, and gradually it developed into the Network for Consumer Rights. And the main thing, we were like doing the advocacy, drafting the laws, talking to the lawmakers, and all this legislation at the provincial level. And coming back to the consumer rights, it's basically a broader thing. It's a cross-cutting thing. It's not specific to one area.
Yeah.
And when there are consumer rights, then there is also consumer duties. The consumer duties is like the consumer has to be informed. He knows how to be, organize himself or themselves, how to, form the groups, and how to, make a complaint, and how to do something like effective advocacy in act with, and maybe how to plead his or her case in a court of law, because it's you always don't need a lawyer to represent you in a consumer court. So you can also plead on that. And the most important thing is how to have the evidence for, pleading the case. And the most important thing is we are not here to challenge the corporate world or the capitalistic world. We are here to, to bring in the corporate efficiency in there. That they should, favoring the consumer, and because even the people or our friends, those who are working in the corporate sector, they are also consumers in one way or the other.
Quite right.
So it's also their right.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I think that's an important point raised, is that often when we talk about consumer rights, the idea is that the consumer is just like big businesses, we're going to keep you in check, and that businesses are out to sort of get you. But it's also about, I suppose in the best way possible, consumer advocacy is also a lot about not just responsible consumption, but also responsible business practices.
Nowadays, the buzzword is sustainable consumption.
Right.
You should know what you are consuming. The food, what you are consuming, do you know what kind of ingredients are there? Is it good for your health? If you're not causing, the non-communicable diseases to yourself, you're not consuming higher levels of the salt, higher levels of the fats, you're having the exercise, these kind of thing. And you are, keep yourselves away from the diseases. So this is also. So here another area is like the standards. These standards and laboratory testing, that's very important for the consumers. And this information needs to be provided to the consumer at large.
I want to come back to standardization because I think that's a very important thing to talk about. But yes, Fahad, you want to say something.
What I wanted to say in between this was that, yes, we're not saying that we're against, corporate overlords or the corporate world in general. However, the fact of the matter is that there are certain laws which have an inherent bias in them. And that is where consumer laws are a good example for that. So the bias here being that the law exists to protect the consumer. The assumption is that an entity is undertaking a manufacturing process or providing a service for a fee. The entity stands to make money out of it. The reason why a consumer goes to that entity is because the consumer has some inherent need that needs to be fulfilled. So the consumer is at that junction at a lower pedestal to the person who's providing the product or the service, because fine, yes, a manufacturer will need customers to come in and buy their product, but the customer first has to have that need. So this person is already, looking for a necessity. This person is vulnerable. Exactly, that's the word I was fighting to find. So your consumer is a vulnerable person. The law exists to prevent any abuse arising out of this vulnerability. So moving on from those, some certain specialized laws, there was an inherent need to have an overarching consumer protection legislative system. And this is not just in Pakistan. This is something that has happened all over the world. We realized it somewhere in '95 that perhaps other than these general regulatory authorities, you need specialized legislation to deal with to protect the rights of consumers.
It's kind of late in the day because from what I understand, like the UN adopted these kind of conventions in 1985.
That is true, but
But do you
So,
think
yes.
it's also because maybe we weren't the industry wasn't as developed from then to now?
That may be definitely a contributing factor. Another contributing factor being the access to information that was available to us at that point in time. We were not really that educated. I don't think we're really educated about consumer rights even today.
No,
this is not
hence this show.
Hence this show. It is not a topic that is of common parlance. Although whenever faced with a problem, our instinctive reaction is that I'll go to the consumer courts against this. Well, can you? That's question number one. Is this a particular sort of thing for which you can go to the consumer courts? There's little to no education on that.
Right.
So if anything that shows like these would aim to achieve is, I mean, that's my hope, is at least put some word out there that amongst various sorts of consumption that a person is doing on a daily basis as a consumer, what are your remedies against them? So never lose...
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that remedies is something I want to talk about. But first, we're going to take a very quick break and come back to this fascinating conversation. Stay with us. Hi, welcome back to the coffee table. We're having a surprisingly riveting conversation about consumer rights, and I'm sort of dissing my own show. It just makes no sense. So, Nadeem, I wanted to ask now at this juncture. Now, before the break, we were talking about how there needs to be advocacy, and a lot of consumers don't realize what rights they do have under the law, both in Pakistan and internationally. So, could you sort of tell us a little bit about that? Like, what does it mean to have rights as a consumer?
Yeah, actually, the most important thing is to be educated on consumer rights, and the second thing is it's not the education, the general concept of the education. It's specifically on the consumer rights, and one should be educated on that one. I understand the government of Punjab has initiated certain steps, and they are trying to educate the consumers on the consumer rights. The other one is being informed, and the third one is being redressed. These are broader things. So the redress, you can get it from the district government. You can also get the redress from the courts, or you can. The first point of getting the redress is the shopkeeper or the vendor himself or the herself. You can always get it that one. So if you see where these consumer rights are voted, so basically these are coming out of the consumer protection guidelines of the United Nations. So these guidelines are periodically reviewed also. So one of the main portion of the guideline is, asking the corporate sector to come up with their own, self-regulatory code of ethics. So the business community and corporate entities, they should be coming out. They should not be, seeing the consumer just the customer. They should be seeing the consumers as the consumers with the rights. They should not be saying a person who is consuming only. So consumer is a much broader thing. So they should take us seriously, and they should come up with their own self-regulatory code of conduct. And not only that, conduct should be on their website. They should also periodically review that one. They should tell us what kind of complaints they are having, how they have redressed that one, and how they have, they improve their own structures or policy structures in there.
And that sort of the education and the awareness thing comes in, and it's a sort of two-way street from what I understand, that if the consumer is aware of their rights, then they can ask for them, and then businesses will know that their consumers know, and then they will have to try harder.
Well, that does take us back to something that Nadeem Saab said, that there should perhaps be a self-regulating mechanism within your business community as well. The thing is, I mean, I don't think this is a problem which is endemic to Pakistan only. If globally you had, even in the more developed sort of nations, if you had manufacturers and business entities who were cognizant about the rights, about the fact that their consumers have rights, you wouldn't have consumers' rights litigation all over the world.
Exactly.
The reason why that exists is because inherently businesses will always look at their bottom line. They will not care about their consumer until and unless someone forces them to. And that is why all of this legislation becomes extremely important. The fact that the UN had to pass a resolution on it, and there had to be some sort of international binding legal obligation to be placed upon nations, inherently shouts that businesses will not do this on their own. Given the fact that we've gone through that experience, still hoping that maybe one day they'll get together and say, we should be more cognizant about our consumers and let's be more responsible towards them. That's not going to happen.
That's a little too much to ask.
It is too much to ask, not little, it's too much to ask, period.
So I want to ask at this juncture now, lawyer, that if one has a complaint, now let's say, for example, the microwave that we talked about, and I buy this microwave and it blows up. And, the manufacturer says that, well, too bad. And I want to now lodge a complaint. So what is the procedure?
So first and foremost, what needs to be understood here is that why did the microwave blow up? That is the first question that you need, as a consumer, you need to ask yourself. One of the things that you can do is you can ask around to see if other people have microwaves that are blowing up, and maybe this is a pandemic in itself, in which event you can claim that this is something which is defective in design, that this is a product which is supplied which is defective in design. You also have other sort of products which are defective because of adequate disclosures not being given on how these products should be used. For example, yes, that is something that the law tells you, that if a product is supposed to be used in a particular way, it is the obligation of the manufacturer to tell you.
Very clearly tell you, not in like tiny print in the corner of the manual.
That's where us lawyers come in to debate all of these things. But what the law requires is that, look, adequate disclosures need to be given on how a product is to be used. For example, if you're plugging it into the wrong socket, yet the manufacturer in a pamphlet saying that, this don't plug it in this sort of a socket, I mean, that's then sort of on you, because the manufacturer has attempted to give you a... So let's assume that the manufacturer does not have a plausible response under the law to why the product blew up, and the product blew up because it was a defective product.
And
let's proceed on that assumption. An obligatory notice to the manufacturer stating in that notice that, look, I purchased this product on such and such date. I used it in accordance with the methodology that you had told me to. However, this has happened. Now, if that blowing up of that microwave is just that you no longer have a microwave to use, you can ask them to give you either a new microwave or give you a refund through that notice.
So first you try to kind of arbitrate between, your lawyer will contact the company and try to find a solution.
Your lawyer, or I mean, you can write that letter yourself.
Oh, you can?
Yes. Okay. There's no requirement to engage counsel to approach a...
So let's say you write this letter,
send them a notice, and they have 15 days to respond.
Important. So within 15 days, they have to
give you a response. If they do not respond in 15 days, or if they do not cure your grievance within 15 days, then you get an opportunity to take the matter either before, depending on what the nature of the dispute that you have, you can either take it before the Consumer Protection Authority that exists in your province, or you can go directly to the Consumer Court. So then you have an opportunity to go to court. Now the court too will attempt to sort it out at a pre-trial stage, ask the manufacturer to come in that, look, this is what has happened to your product. And by the way, we're proceeding on the assumption that it's a microwave that has blown up. What if, you had someone installed tiles in your home? And, the installation was defective. A week later, the tiles start popping up, and, that defective services is also something you have a remedy
Or
against.
if you go to a restaurant and you get horrendous food poisoning.
Again, that would be something which may not necessarily fall under the jurisdiction of the consumer courts. But like I mentioned earlier, there are other regulators who are given the jurisdiction. So the Punjab Food Authority, for example, would be the appropriate forum where you go for the redressal of this particular grievance, that a food product that was supplied to me was caused me some damage.
So you also have to identify with whom to register your specific complaint.
That unfortunately is where we come in.
Or fortunately.
Or fortunately for us, perhaps unfortunately for our consumers who are generally hesitant. So yeah, there is a whole redressal mechanism that is provided under the law for defective goods and services.
Yeah.
By the way, consumer rights law inherently also includes that you should not be misled. So unfair trade practices also includes false advertising or bait advertisement. Is one of the things that is covered under consumer rights legislation.
What is an example of bait advertising?
So making promises which your product simply cannot keep. Or your service can
claims
simply not,
also that are not
that
true.
Are simply not true.
So if you say
demonstratively,
the best cereal in the market, but like according to whom?
According to whom? Are you qualifying it with something? Or for example, if you say that if you take our particular cereal, it will increase your child's growth.
Yeah.
Well, where are you getting that information from? If you've simply pulled it out of your bag and said that, well, I've decided this is what I'm going to claim about my product, that is false. That is something that you can be held accountable for.
So if you give your child the cereal and they don't grow, then you can potentially sue that company and say that
they've given like 10 disclaimers, which we do see every time we see an advert. There's a reason those disclaimers exist on all of those advertisements in very fine print usually. But the reason why they exist is because consumer rights laws, such as the Consumer Protection Act, demands that. The Consumer Protection Act, for example, in Punjab also, and Sindh for that matter as well, also demands that you put a price on your product. You print it on there, a batch number, so that, for example, if it is found that a particular batch of products is consistently defective, your courts have an opportunity to say that, look, remove all of this batch from the market. Fine, I may agree with them, the consumer court may agree with the manufacturer that your product is otherwise okay, but clearly there's something wrong with this particular batch, so remove at least this much.
And I feel like this is where regulation comes in, and this is what Naeem, you also mentioned previously. How does one regulate goods and services in the market? Like I feel like with goods, maybe it might be easier because you like Fahad said, if you have batch numbers and you have, expiration dates and codes, and then there's a manufacturing process. But what about services? Isn't that just really difficult to monitor? How do we create regulations that are effective?
Actually, one needs to understand that the focus of consumer protection, the whole framework is to prevent certain situation where a consumer has to go to the court of law.
Right.
Okay, the cost of consumer increases. You have given the example of microwave. So the cost of microwave average would be like 10,000, 15,000 rupees. So now the process that has been detailed, it's quite a cumbersome process.
Yes.
And when you even reach to the court, then there are the companies have very well-trained lawyers, and they are, very adept into, these kind of the fights. So they know each and every kind of thing. While the new lawyers may not be that much adept in all those things. So there are chances that you may lose the case over there for 10,000, 15,000 rupees. I am going out of my office, and also losing my money from there. And then I am also spending the money. So maybe for 10, 15,000, I am spending 50,000 rupees. So that's how the consumers are not going to the courts, and they are not. So when we talk about the prevention is like the softer regulatory framework should be there. And that's why I am saying that the code of conduct, self-regulatory code of conduct should be there. And, we should be addressing these things by themselves. And the consumers will definitely be going to and choosing those products, those which are consumer friendly and where there are less complaints. Mind it, one of the main thing is it's not how much complaints you are getting and you think that the law is very effective. It's mainly how much complaints were there, say in 2015, and by 2016, if the numbers of complaints have reduced. So this is the benchmark. It's not that the number of complaints have increased.
Okay.
So how you are having these kind of things? Just to give you an example, recently we got tested certain cooking oil products against the standards. These are mandatory. So we haven't found any problem in there. So we are talking about softer regulations. We are talking about prevention. We are talking about deceptive marketing. Whatsoever is there, whatsoever the claims the corporate sector is making, these should be supported by some credible evidence, and there should be some scientific evidence to that one. And that evidence, which is also recognized in the Pakistan or the regulatory framework within the Pakistan. These are some of the points that needs to be highlighted into the whole framework.
Absolutely. We're going to a very quick break here and kind of unpack some of those points. Stay with us. Hi, welcome back to this really interesting conversation about consumer rights. And from what I understand, and now Nadeem talked to me about this a little bit more, is that when consumer advocacy means that consumers can make informed choices about what they are consuming, but there are also benefits to having standards in the market that also benefit businesses. And what are those?
Right now, we are working with the Pakistan Quality and Standard Control Authority, and it's in the process of developing the standards or adopting the international standards for the cars or for the automobile. So we are part of that one. So once those standards are made mandatory, so the standards of the cars which are being manufactured or assembled in Pakistan, it's going to improve. And once those standards are made mandatory, you can get the results from the test results, and then you can take those results and go to the court of law, and you can get the proper compensation from there. Then the whole this area is getting broader and broader.
Yes.
So here the how much educated a consumer is and how much he is educated to decipher the information which is being provided to him or her. For his or her own interest. This is very crucial in here. So consumer education is very critical in this area. And another area is laboratory testing. That's what I am saying, that thing. Accredited labs needs to be established, and their standards needs to be enhanced or improved, that they can really deliver the credible results. And when you are standard, then even this is a comfortable zone for the corporate sector as well, because they know what they have to comply to. And then there may not be many cases in the court of law. Sorry, it may be not good for some of our friends, but that could be the ideal situation.
I'm actually going to agree with you on this, Nadeem. So one of the problems that we as lawyers, one of the primary problems that we as lawyers face whenever we are dealing with a case of faulty services or a defective product is, how do we establish, as you mentioned as well, that the product was defective?
Yes.
How do we establish that a particular service that was provided to me was inadequate? There is no expert, for example, in that tile example.
Yes.
I actually have a client with me, and this is one of the things that I'm struggling with right now, that how do I tell the service provider who put those tiles down for that consumer that this was a faulty service delivery that you've done? I'm grappling with it myself, that maybe a particular bond was supposed to be applied, it wasn't applied properly. I'm researching on the internet. I do not have any resources that I could tap into to provide me the technical support that I as a lawyer need in order to establish my case in court. Now, while the law is very rosy to the extent that any cost of litigation that my client will incur, including my costs and any expert's cost, they will be compensated. But the fact of the matter is, how do I get the information for my client in the first place to establish his claim before the court? So even us lawyers are faced with this primary problem. We are not technical experts. We are legal experts. I do not know how a microwave functions. I do not know how tiles are supposed to be laid. I do not know, for example, how a surgery is supposed to be done. And that too is a service in of itself. So who do I go to? And this is, I think, where the focus in the coming years should be, insofar as consumer rights law is concerned, developing institutions that aid people who have been harmed by a defective product or service and aiding them in establishing their claims before the competent forums, whatsoever that forum may be. I think that is perhaps one of the most, laboratory testing, for example, is a key feature that comes into it. When we're talking about laboratory tests, we're not just talking about, okay, I'm going to take a liquid to like PCSIR and see what they say about the
or having like your bottled water tested or
I
something
would
like
want an engineering firm to exist which specializes in checking and rechecking products that are manufactured by other manufacturers to see whether they conform to certain standards, whether they are defective in design or defective in quality, or which are the legal terms used.
Do you think that there is also a problem on the manufacturing side, that perhaps it's not all bad faith, but it's also the fact that even manufacturers or provisioners of a service, they don't realize, service providers, they don't realize that there are these standards that they're supposed to be meeting?
I think for service providers, especially in certain key areas such as medical professional or as legal professionals or accounting professionals, I mean, for certain areas, specific regulatory bodies exist which have determined what the standards are for us to follow. Even in the construction industry, for example, there is an association of architects and builders which sets standards on how you're supposed to work. So while there are certain key service and service industries where standards exist. There are manufacturing industries where standards exist. For example, the Drug Regulatory Authority of Pakistan and then provincial drug regulatory authorities are regulating the manufacturing process of medication for the end consumer, again, which is, it is also a product being supplied, manufactured and supplied to a consumer. So while there are certain services and goods for which
there is a framework.
There is a framework. I think an overwhelming majority, for other overwhelming majority of consumption that we do on a day-to-day basis, there are not any standards.
There aren't.
Either for the manufacturer or for the consumer, for that matter. I mean, it does sound like we're really putting it to the manufacturer right now, but like you mentioned, maybe the manufacturer isn't, educated enough or isn't aware enough on what are the parameters within which that manufacturing process should be undertaken.
So does this mean that as a consumer, we need to be more sort of aware and more responsible about the choices we're making, or sort of demand better? Because, like, for example, sustainability is a big sort of catchphrase now. And people are wanting to buy organic, for example. So then that's kind of forcing businesses to then produce things that are organic, or at least purported to be organic, because that is also a real can of worms, I'm told.
We haven't been able to check yet for most of them.
And apparently it's impossible to really check. But it sounds like a lot of work for a consumer to be doing.
That is why the law does not require the consumer to do that. The law requires particular councils to be established in each and every single province in order to do precisely this.
Do we have? But we do have councils.
Yes. So the Islamabad, all 5 laws on consumer protection here in Pakistan require certain councils to be established, and the primary purpose of those councils is precisely to come up with policies on how certain processes, either manufacturing or service provision, under what parameters is that to be done. And they are also tasked with coming up with policies on what disclaimers should be given to consumers as of right whenever they're consuming a product or a service. That's the hope that they eventually come to that realization, because at the end of the day, companies that have been successful have been in sort of the more developed nations, have been the ones who've been responsive to consumer complaints. For example, Ford put out this car called the Pinto, and whenever someone would ram into it from behind, the car would simply burst into flames.
And it actually explode.
Yeah, that's what used to happen to it. So they recalled all of the Ford Pintos, and there was a whole legislative revolution in the USA on how to regulate the automobile industry. So as a curative measure, we've seen legislation sort of respond to it, and that again, the regulation of then the automobile industry is something which had the input of the industry itself in it as well. It didn't happen in a vacuum. Legislatures or consumers did not meet in a secret room and say that, okay, this is now the standard.
Take down Ford.
We want to take down Ford. No one wants to take down Ford in the US in the 80s in any event.
No.
But
and ultimately, it's in everyone's better interest to keep the market going. Ultimately, it's probably better for everybody in the long run.
It is.
Yes, so thank you so much, Fahad. Thank you so much, Nadeem, for being on the show with us. I realize that this is like a vast topic, but I think that we've sort of, got a good handle on the tip of the iceberg. I think what I've taken away from this is that as a consumer, it is very important for us to know what our rights are and to ask for those things. And, hopefully businesses will listen to us because, what are businesses without the consumer? If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time on The Coffee Table. Bye now.